New Orleans doesn't have 4 seasons. That would be showing off. Down here, we tell time by what's on the plate. King cake means carnival. Crawfish means spring. Snowballs means summer has decided to kill you. Gumbo means somebody finally found a reason to turn the stove back on. And when the holidays arrive, the city brings out the oysters, the Revlon dinner, pralines, and enough sugar to make January feel like a personal accusation. So forget the calendar on the wall. In New Orleans, we eat our way through the year. So what are we waiting for? Let's go. From Twelfth Night to Lent, King Cake rules New Orleans. Bakeries fill the cases, offices fill the break rooms, and everybody starts pretending that finding a plastic baby in their cinnamon roll is perfectly normal. It's sugar, tradition, and Mardi Gras wrapped in purple, green, and gold. And for a few glorious weeks, it owns this town. Twelfth Night has come and gone, which means New Orleanians can finally start eating king cake without offending God, tradition, or somebody's grandmother. And before the sun is properly awake, people are already lining up at Manny Randazzo's in Metro. They'll stand there with coffee in hand, waiting for a braided ring of cinnamon icing and purple, green, and gold sugar. Is it excessive? Certainly. Is it New Orleans? Completely. A Vietnamese bakery in New Orleans East took the king cake, gave it a little French pastry technique, and created a monster. The dough is soft, buttery, and layered instead of heavy, with a thick cream cheese icing that has developed a following borderlining on religion. Don Phuong started making king cakes all the way back in 2008, figuring 100 boxes ought to cover it. Word got out. Then came national attention and a James Beard American Classics Award in 2018. Today, people line up early. Cakes sell out, and getting your hands on one during Carnival can feel less like buying dessert and more like acquiring contraband. Now, if you're only buying one king cake this Carnival season, make it Gambino. Why? Because this is the old school New Orleans king cake, the kind generations grew up bringing into offices, schools, and family tables. Sweet braided dough, cinnamon, icing, and enough purple, green, and gold sugar to declare Mardi Gras from across the room. Don Phuong may be the sophisticated one. Randazzo's may have the line, but Gambino's taste like somebody just yelled, "Who got the baby?" And if you only get one king cake, you might as well get the whole New Orleans experience. Every March 19th, New Orleans celebrates St. Joseph's Day, brought here by Sicilian immigrants in the late 1800s. Back in Sicily, St. Joseph answered prayers during a famine. So folks thanked him with altars piled high with bread, pastries, fruit, and enough food to make fasting seem poorly planned. The Sicilians came to New Orleans and brought the traditions with them. They also brought something else, lunch. Around the French market, Sicilian workers were buying round Muffuletta bread, salami, cheese, and olive salad. Good ingredients, terrible transportation. Then in 1906, Salvador Lupo of Central Grocery did the sensible thing and put the whole business between 2 halves of bread. The Muffuletta was born. And if you want the original, Central Grocery is still right there on Decatur Street, handing out the OG Muffuletta like they have nothing left to prove, which honestly, they don't. Then there's the Napoleon House. The building dates to 1797 and was once the home of New Orleans Mayor Nicolas Gerard, who supposedly offered it as a refuge for Napoleon Bonaparte. Napoleon Bonaparte was a no-show. Apparently, even emperors have trouble making reservations in the French Quarter. The Impostata family took over the property in 1914, and Napoleon House eventually developed its own twist on the Sicilian Muffuletta. They warmed it. Instead of serving the sandwich cold, Napoleon House heats the whole affair until the cheese softens and the oils from the meats and the olive salad soak into the bread. The restaurant says heating it intensifies the flavor, which it does. Central Grocery gave New Orleans the original. Napoleon House looked at it and said essentially, fine sandwich, now let's put some heat to it. The Irish experience in New Orleans was different from almost anywhere else in America. They didn't just arrive in a new country. They arrived in a subtropical port city with yellow fever, flooding, mosquitoes, political corruption because some things never change, and summer weather apparently designed by somebody holding a grudge. Large numbers came during the Great Famine of the 1840s and 1850s. New Orleans was a major immigration port back then, and for many Irish newcomers, this is where the ship stopped and America began. They settled heavily in neighborhoods upriver from the French Quarter, particularly around what became known as the Irish Channel. They worked the docks, the warehouses, the railroads, construction sites, and other hard, dangerous jobs that kept a booming port city moving. 19th century New Orleans could be a deadly place for a poor immigrant with a shovel, and yet they stayed. They built churches, opened business, formed benevolent societies, entered politics, became police officers and firefighters, imagine that, raised families, and gradually became part of the city's identity. New Orleans didn't erase their Irishness, it did what New Orleans usually does with somebody else's culture. It seasoned it. That helps explain why St. Patrick's Day in New Orleans isn't merely a green version of somebody else's parade. It isn't simply a celebration of Ireland, it's a celebration of the Irish becoming New Orleanians without completely surrendering where they came from. Their ancestors arrived poor, took dangerous jobs, endured epidemics and discrimination, and helped build the physical and political city around them. Today their descendants climb aboard floats and throw cabbages at strangers. That's progress, New Orleans style. If you want to understand Irish New Orleans, start at Parasol. Sits right in the middle of the Irish Channel where generations of Irish immigrants worked, raised families, drank a few beers, and occasionally disagreed about whose round it was. Come St. Patrick's Day, the neighborhood erupts. Parasol isn't just watching Irish history from the sidelines. It's standing right in the middle of it, holding a roast beef poor boy. Then there's McCool's, founded by folks from Belfast who apparently decided New Orleans needed Guinness, Irish whiskey, and soccer before breakfast. They were right. It's become one of the city's great neighborhood pubs, a place where football means soccer, whiskey means Irish, and yelling at a television is considered thoughtful analysis. Finally, we get to the mighty, mighty Erin Rose, tucked just off Bourbon Street. Small, dark, and refreshingly uninterested in putting on a show. The frozen iced coffee here is famous. The room, usually crowded, and the place feels like the French Quarter before somebody figured out that tourists will pay $20 for a watered-down cocktail. In South Louisiana, crawfish season runs roughly from late winter through early summer, with March through May usually being prime season. That's when they're bigger, cheaper, and everybody's willing to work 20 minutes for just 3 bites of dinner. Funny thing is, New Orleans wasn't always crawfish country. Before the 1950s, crawfish belonged mostly to Cajun country. New Orleans preferred oysters, shrimp, and crabs. Crawfish were considered bayou food. Good, but they hadn't been invited downtown yet. Then the invitation arrived. Ella Brennan and the Brennan restaurant family helped bring regional Louisiana cooking into the city's better dining room. Al Scaramuzza, owner of Seafood City, took Crawfish to the masses with those unforgettable television commercials of the 1960s and 70s. Al didn't whisper about Crawfish. He sold them like the fate of civilization depended on moving another sack. Then came Chef Paul Prudhomme, who carried Cajun cooking from Commander's Palace to Cape Paul's and eventually across America. Acadia gave us the Crawfish. Brennan put it in the dining room, Scaramuzza put it on television, and Prudhomme took it to the nation. Not bad for a little creature whose principal address is the mud. You got two ways to handle boiled crawfish in New Orleans. Neither involves a fork. First, there's J&J Seafood over in Gretna on the West Bank. It's old school. Walk in, get a few pounds of hot boiled crawfish, corn, and potatoes, then leave. No waiter, no linen, no fellow asking whether everything is tasty wonderful. You already know it is. In 2026, boiled crawfish around the New Orleans area generally ran roughly around $5 to $7 a pound, depending on the week in the market. Around Easter, the statewide average was around $6.10 a pound. And that's not bad. And then there's the sit-down approach at Ball Seafood House on Magazine Street. You get a table, a server, drinks, different seasonings and seafood combinations. Their larger ball combinations can run up to $45 to $60 or more. But now you're buying dinner and an experience, not really crawfish by the pound. So which is better? JJ is crawfish the way locals often eat it. Grab a sack, find a table, spread out some newspaper, and commence hostilities. Boil is crawfish with accommodations. Somebody brings it to you, somebody cleans up afterwards, and naturally somebody eventually brings you the bill. Same mud bug, two entirely different environmental systems. The New Orleans Snowball isn't complicated. Ice, syrup, a paper cup, and enough Louisiana humidity to make the customer surrender without a fight. Economically, it's no shrimp industry. Nobody's buying a yacht because they had a good year selling nectar cream. But taken together, New Orleans area snowball stands likely generate millions of dollars in seasonal sales. And the money moves around. Stands hire local workers. Owners buy ice, sugar, flavoring, cups, condensed milk, and equipment. They pay rent, utilities, taxes, and somebody to repair the machine when it decides to quit during a 96-degree Saturday afternoon. Then there's tourism. Places like Hansen Snowballs have turned shaved ice into a New Orleans attraction. Visitors come looking for jazz, gumbo, and questionable decisions on Bourbon Street, and somewhere along the way, somebody hands them a snowball. The modern business goes back to the 1930s when Ernest Hansen and George Altalamo developed ice shaving machines that helped turn a street treat into a neighborhood industry. Today, the snowball business remains what New Orleans does particularly well. Small businesses turning something cheap and simple into jobs, tax revenue, tourism, and tradition. It may only be ice and syrup, but then again, a martini is mostly gin. Nobody complains about that. Juneteenth starts in Galveston, Texas on June 19, 1865. Union troops arrived with some news. Slavery was over. The Emancipation Proclamation had been issued more than 2 years earlier, but apparently the message took the scenic route. Freedom was one thing, building a life with it was another. That's where New Orleans Dookie Chase's comes into the story. The Chase family started with a little sandwich shop in 1939. Dookie Chase Jr. and Leah Chase eventually turned the family business into something considerably bigger. A great Creole restaurant. During segregation, a meeting place for the civil rights movement. Martin Luther King Jr., Thurgood Marshall, A.P. Terrard, and other civil rights leaders came through these doors, and upstairs, people planned how to change America. Downstairs, Leah Chase fed them. Everybody has a part to play. That's what makes Dookie Chase a fitting place to celebrate Juneteenth. Juneteenth tells the story of getting freedom. Dookie Chases tells the story of what you do with it. Build a family business, employ your neighbors, collect black art, feed your community, give people a place to meet when meeting together could get them arrested, and keep the gumbo hot. More than 150 years after announcement in Galveston, we're sitting at a table in New Orleans celebrating the same idea. Freedom was never the end of the story. It was where the work started. Fortunately, somebody remembered to cook lunch.
Your work on earth is truly what you do to help the world you live in.
Every fried shrimp in the French Quarter has a backstory. It just usually doesn't live long enough to tell it. Our shrimp begins offshore in the Gulf of Mexico, one of hundreds of thousands of eggs released by its mother. The odds aren't good from the start. Fish, crabs, and practically anything with an appetite considers baby shrimp an appetizer. Currents carry the survivors into Louisiana's bays and marshes. That's the nursery. Warm water, plenty of food, and enough predators to keep everybody alert. The shrimp eats, grows, and molts, and it grows fast. There isn't much time for childhood when half the Gulf wants to eat you. Within months, it begins moving out of the marshes toward deeper water. Our shrimp spent months avoiding redfish, trout, crabs, and everything else with teeth. Nobody warned him about boats. The catch comes aboard, gets chilled, and heads for the dock. From there, the shrimp may be sorted, graded, headed, peeled, packed, and shipped to a New Orleans restaurant. Now, things move quickly. Seasoning, flour, or corn meal, hot oil. A few minutes later, an animal that started microscopic in the Gulf is laying between two pieces of French bread dressed with lettuce, tomato, pickles, and mayonnaise. Total age? Probably somewhere around 6 months to a year, depending on the species, season, and size. And if the fisherman hadn't caught him, he may have lived longer. Brown and white Gulf shrimp can potentially survive well beyond a year, sometimes approaching 2, but that's hardly a pension plan. Eventually something bigger probably would have eaten him. That's the life of a Louisiana shrimp. Born in the Gulf, raised in the marsh, caught at sea, processed at the dock, fried in New Orleans. A short life, but one heck of an exit. It's August in New Orleans. 95 degrees, humidity thick enough to wear, and the mosquitoes are still collecting rent. Naturally, we call it fall. Why? The Saints are playing preseason football. Around here, autumn doesn't arrive with changing leaves. It arrives when somebody puts on a black and gold jersey, fires up the grill, and starts yelling "Who dat?" at a television. And then there's LSU, purple and gold, Saturday night in Death Valley. Mike the Tiger watching over the whole operation like he owns the state, which, depending on who you ask, he does. And that brings us to 2 former LSU walk-ons, Brandon Landry and Jack Warner. They took the walk-on attitude, added burgers, Louisiana cooking, cold drinks, and enough televisions to monitor a small war, and created Walk-On Sports Bistro. Then Drew Brees came aboard as a partner. Now you had 2 LSU walk-ons teamed up with the quarterback who brought a Super Bowl championship to New Orleans. Purple and gold meets black and gold. Mike the Tiger meets Who Dat Nation. Nobody gets hurt. Everybody gets fed. And Louisiana, we call that diplomacy. New Orleans has never been good at celebrating anything quietly, so naturally Halloween needed a parade. The Krewe of Boo was founded in 2007, with its first parade rolling in 2008 as a fundraiser for Hurricane Katrina relief. After disappearing for several years, it crawled out of the grave in 2013 under Brian Kern and grew into New Orleans' official Halloween parade. And the Kern name matters. This is the family that helped turn Mardi Gras float building into an art form. So Krewe of Boo gets the full treatment. Monsters, skeletons, marching bands, dance crews, elaborate floats, and enough costumes to make the French Quarter look almost normal. Its importance is simple. Krewe of Boo gives Halloween the New Orleans treatment. Other cities carve pumpkins. We close streets. It has become the unofficial opening gun for Halloween season, a family-friendly spectacle that brings locals and visitors downtown and turns October into a miniature carnival season. Because in New Orleans, if a holiday is worth celebrating, sooner or later somebody's going to put it on a float. The French Quarter is nearly 3 centuries old. That's a long time to collect stories and bodies. Fires have swept through it. Yellow fevered empty houses. Hurricanes came calling. Duels settled arguments. Slavery left its scars. Soldiers, sailors, gamblers, priests, immigrants, merchants, and assorted people of questionable judgment all passed through these narrow streets. Some apparently forgot to leave. Add old Creole townhouses, hidden courtyards, flickering gas lamps, above-ground cemeteries, and balconies that creak at 3 in the morning, and you got yourself a respectable ghost problem. Then there are the legends: Madame Lalaurie, Pierre Dagobert, the ghost of the Ursuline Convent, Lafitte's blacksmith shop, and enough haunted hotels to make checking in feel like a seance with room service. Are the ghosts real? Depends upon who you ask. But walk alone down a quiet French Quarter street after midnight, hear footsteps behind you, turn around and find nobody there? Well, that would actually be the best possible outcome of that situation. Suddenly, scientific skepticism becomes negotiable. New Orleans has been burying its dead for over 300 years. Apparently, some of them just prefer the French Quarter. Every November, about an hour north of New Orleans, Louisiana decides reality has had a fair shot and heads back to the Renaissance. The Louisiana Renaissance Festival, outside Hammond, turns the fictional English village of Albright into a 16th century playground of knights, jousting, swordplay, craftsmen, musicians, merchants, royalty, pirates, fairies, and enough people wearing leather in Louisiana humidity to demonstrate genuine commitment and concern. The festival says it draws more than 75,000 visitors a year. From New Orleans, figure roughly 58 miles in about an hour by car, depending on where you start and whether I-10 and I-55 have decided to cooperate with civilization for once. Then there's the turkey leg. You can't properly attend a Renaissance festival without walking around carrying a turkey leg the size of a Louisville Slugger. It's practically the unofficial scepter of the American Ren Fair. There's just one historical inconvenience. Medieval Europeans didn't have turkey. Turkeys are native to the Americas. Indigenous people domesticated them long before Europeans arrived, and they were carried across the Atlantic during the Columbian Exchange. So Columbus reached the Americas in 1492, and Europeans encountered the bird after. Turkeys became established in Europe during the 16th century, which means if you're trying to create medieval Europe, the turkey leg is about as authentic as a night checking Instagram. The Louisiana Renaissance Festival is really recreating a fictional English village around 1565. And by then, turkeys actually had reached Europe. So technically, they got an alibi. And besides, nobody's driving an hour from New Orleans, putting on chainmail, watching 2 grown men knock each other off horses, and says, you know what would make this more historically accurate? Nix the turkey. You get the turkey leg. History has its limits. Praline came to Louisiana with French credentials, but New Orleans took one look at it and changed the recipe. Almonds were fine if you were sitting around Versailles. Louisiana had pecans, plenty of them. Then there was sugar. By the 19th century, Louisiana had built a serious economy around sugarcane. Cane grew all summer. Then came harvest season in the fall. You wanted it cut and hauled to the mill before a hard freeze ruined the party. October came, November came. The cane knives and later the machinery went to work. Once cane was cut, there wasn't much time for a philosophical discussion. It had to get to the mill and get crushed. The juice was boiled down into sugar, molasses, and syrup. And wouldn't you know it, Christmas was coming. That mattered. The Louisiana sugar harvest traditionally put newly produced sugar and molasses into the economy during the same season when people were preparing Thanksgiving, Christmas, and New Year's sweets. And pecans? They were coming in during the fall too. Louisiana had accidentally arranged the perfect candy conspiracy. All somebody needed was a pot. Enslaved black cooks helped transform the European praline into something distinctly Louisiana, replacing expensive almonds with local pecans and developing the creamy brown sugar confection New Orleans would make famous. After emancipation, black women helped turn that recipe into a business. They sold pralines in markets and on New Orleans streets, particularly around places where people had money in their pocket. Markets, docks, commercial streets, and eventually tourist districts. It was small business capitalism boiled down to about 240 degrees. Sugar wasn't worth much sitting in a sack. Pecans weren't worth much sitting under a tree. Put them together, add labor and know-how, and suddenly somebody was paying you for candy. By the late 19th century and early 20th century, the praline had become part of the New Orleans experience. Then tourism arrived with money. That changed everything. Pralines moved from street baskets into candy shops. Shops put them in boxes. Boxes went home with tourists. New Orleans had discovered one of its favorite economic principles. Never sell somebody an ingredient when you can sell them a tradition.